All right.
If you mute button. One day I did the whole session, I forgot to turn off the mute button.
Just, getting reuse.
Back into the.
Well, when you're, okay, there were two days of learning I should have mentioned yesterday. I got my dates mixed up. That's what happens when you're flying and we left Israel at 5 o'clock in the morning, traveled all day, things like that. So I'm going to start off with our learning sponsors again and include, learning sponsors, A Year of Learning, Friends of Leonie Meiselman, Leah Sabra Bat Chunach Zundel, Friends of Meliskotsky, Moshe Zelig Ben Mordechai, Martin Lippman and family in memory of his wife, Malka Chana Bas Pinchas, Friends of Herb Jeremiah, Tzvi Ben Zev, Friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel Barab Ben Yaakov, Friends of Gideon Lozinski, Mordechai Shlomo Ben Meir, Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Kohen. Those who were inspired by our Rebbets in Emerita, Sheila Shapiro, Sarah Esther Malkabat, Meshulam Yisach. A month of learning by Malki and Rabbi Dr. Yankee Honig in memory of her father, Yosef Ben Yecheskel Yehuda. Marsha Federbush in memory of her husband, Oriel Pinchas Ben Rav Shimon. Gary and Marsha Schrager in memory of his parents, Freda Bat Hendel, David Ben Yosef. Okay, a week of learning by also Marsha Federbush in memory of her mother, Chaya Elkabat Moshe Akiva. Shelley and Oscar Moll in memory of her father, Shlomo Ruvain Ben Binyamin. Yesterday there was a day of learning by Judy Jeremias in memory of her mother-in-law, Leah Bat Moshe, as well as by Edward and Ruth Goldberg in memory of his father, Zev Ben Anshel Halevi. Okay, today is the 4th. So we just recited those today, right? Today is the 4th. Okay, see, I'm getting my days mixed up. Okay, so that was Judy Jeremiah and Ed and Ruth Goldberg. And that catches us up for today. Okay. Right. Also was Alan Blumenfeld, A Week of Learning in memory of his, right, we did that yesterday. Okay. All set? Whoever is here, right? Yep. I guess Shraga 50. We'll see. Okay, so he asked that I go back and review the Mishnah on the bottom of Ayin Tet Amud Beis. Okay, so I'm going to go through it, first part that we did yesterday fairly quickly. And then when we get to pay, Amud Pay, we'll slow down and we'll continue. That's today's daf, is Amud Pay. Okay, so the Mishnah on the bottom, again, middle of Ayin Tet Amud Beis, not the middle, about 2/3 down, says Katav L'shum Malchut She'ina Hogenet, if they write and put the date in for the kingdom that's not appropriate. And the implication is this was for the Roman government, okay? Right, and why is it, we're going to see, the Gemara is going to ask, why is it called not appropriate? L'shum Malchut Madai, for the Median government, L'shum Malchut Yavan, for the Greek government, the Binyan Habayit, for the time of using the date from the building of the Beis HaMikdash, the Chuban Habayit, date of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, Hayab Mizrach v'Katav Ma'arav, if they were in the east and they wrote the information on the west, Ma'arav, they were in the west, the Katav Ma'azrach, and they wrote the information like they were in the east. Okay, and all of those are errors in the main part of the get at the outset. Okay, what happens? Teitzei mizeh mizeh, she must divorce both the first husband and the second. Utzricha get mizeh mizeh, and she must receive a get from each one of them. Ve'ein la lo ketubah, she does not receive her ketubah from either one of them. Velo peirot, and there is no peirot for the husband, and so therefore he does not have money by which to redeem her from captivity. Velo mizonot, and he has no responsibility to provide her sustenance. Velo blaot, and no responsibility for any garments that she either wore out or that she brought with her and wanted to present to be covered. Velo alzeh, velo alzeh. Neither this for this one, first husband, nor for that one, the second husband. Imnat lamizeh, if she took any, right, the garments or things like that, tachzir, she must return them. Va'avlad mamzer mizer umizer. And we would declare that any progeny that she had, okay, would be a mamzer. Why? Because we indicated that the first marriage was a doraita marriage, and therefore, in that case, the get was not a valid get. So when she married the second man, okay, it was considered an act of adultery, and therefore that's the rationale.
Why should it from the first of the Imam?
Good question. Let's see if the Gemara addresses that. Okay. Remember, all of these are penalties for this woman. So it could be just a suggestion, but we'll see if the Gemara addresses it, that again, she didn't read the get adequately. She went ahead and got married. And so therefore that's why one of the penalties. Okay. Right. So what happens below, right? Velo zeh v'zeh mitamin. If in either case he was a Kohen, okay, he does not become tamei and not able to bury her. All right, lo mitamin la. Velo zeh v'zeh zakiin lo b'mitziata, and neither one of them is has the benefit of acquiring anything that she finds. Right? Velo b'maseh yadeha, nor do they have the benefit of acquiring any work that she does. V'lo b'hafarat nedareha, nor do they have the responsibility for nullifying her vows. Hayta bat Yisrael, if she was the daughter, a Israelite daughter, nifselet min kahuna, she is not permitted to marry a Kohen. Okay, and we get to the top of pay now. Today's stuff, we said Bat Levi, if she's the daughter of a Leviah, Min Hamaser, she is not permitted to have any tithe. All right. Bat Kohen Min Truma, nor she is, if she's the daughter of a Kohen, she is prohibited, okay, from obtaining any kind of truma. Ve'en Yoshin Shel Zeh, Yoshin Shel Zeh, and neither the heirs of the first husband nor the heirs of the second husband, Yoshim Ktubata, okay, would be the heirs to inherit, okay, her Ktuba, right? And that's basically where we stopped yesterday. Now this Mishnah is continuing, and all of this continues to be what the Rashi tells us, knasa, okay? It is a clear penalties for her, right? Ve'imetu achiv shel zeh, v'achiv shel zeh. If it happens that the brother of one of these husbands, okay, if right, passed away, if one of them passed away, cholzin, she is required to do chalitza. V'lo miyabmin, and she is not permitted to do yibum, okay, with either one of them. Okay, now we get to a new piece in the Mishnah. Okay, so we've seen so far, okay, that that's in regards to her status. Okay, if the dates, okay, or the location of the get is inappropriate. Okay, now we're going to get to, if we said if the dates or the location is inappropriate, what about if other items are incorrect in the get? Okay, right? What happens? Shina Shmo, okay, Vishma. For some reason, his name or her name was changed. In the Gittin, when the Sofer usually writes it, not only does he put his Hebrew name, let's say Moshe ben Pipik, okay, but he might also say Hamachune, okay, Maurice, right, or something like that. Okay, so in other words, any change of the name is problematic. Okay, Ushma, Shem Iro, V'Shem Ira, the location. Okay, the name of his city or the name of her city.
Did you skip the part where it says she's an islandess?
We didn't get to that yet.
Oh,
Okay, or I don't feel we got to that yet. Okay, Velo miyabmi, right? Right. V'Shem Ira, Teitzei mizeh umizeh.
oh, no, no, okay.
Right? She must divorce both each of these men. V'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba, and all these other penalties, all these other ways of her punishment are included as well. Okay. Now we get to the issue of the Ilonis. Okay. Okay. So what happens? Kol rayot. Okay. So we have a number of women. Remember, when he marries somebody who are forbidden to him, then because they are first or second level relatives to her. Okay, so those are the arayot. Sha'amru tsarotehen mutarot, where, okay, we have known that if it was a co-wife, she would be permitted. Okay, and what happens? Okay, halchu hatzarot ha'elu v'nisu, and these women, these co-wives, okay, went and since this woman got married, okay, apparently based on this erroneous get, okay, these co-wives are now free also to be married
Erroneously.
in error, right? V'nimtzeu elu ailonis, okay, and one of these women, okay, is found to be a woman incapable of giving birth, okay, and therefore it is the woman herself who got remarried with the incorrect get who is the one who has to be either yibum or something else, right? Because a woman that is an Ilonis really should not be married lechatchila. Okay, so what happens in that case? Teitzei mizeh umizeh b'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba. She must divorce each of these two men, and again, all the penalties referred to above applying to her. Okay, let's take another example, says our Mishnah. Hakones et yavamto. Okay, the brother-in-law has relations with this sister-in-law. Okay, on the understanding that this way he's performing yibum with her. Okay, because his brother died. Vahalchat sarata v'niseid le'acher, and her co-wife, okay, goes and marries a third party. Okay, what happens then? V'nimtzeit zo shahita ilonit, and again we discover that this co-wife is a ilonit. Okay, so if that's the case, again, it should have been this woman who is the one who has the obligation for either chalitza or yibum. But what the problem is, again, she has a incorrect get, all right, an erroneous get. So what happens? What must she do? Teitzei mizeh mizeh. She must divorce each one of them, right? B'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba. And again, all the penalties apply to her. Okay. Now, we get to a new part of our Mishnah. Okay, who might be the person? I'm going to raise this as a question to introduce this piece, that for some reason could have made an error in the writing of the get. Okay, we have two options. One would be if the husband wrote it himself, right? The other would be if he dictated to a scribe and told the scribe, I want you to write this get for my wife. Okay, so we have two people that, or we actually have a third if there were, let's say, two witnesses, and he tells one of the witnesses, oh, you know how to write a get? Okay, I want you to write a get, and also besides writing it, I want you to sign it as one of the witnesses. Okay, so we actually have three options as to who would be writing out the get.
And signing it.
Okay, yes, Bob.
Just to clarify one thing, if a woman is an islandee, is she available for Yibum or she's
She should not be getting married.
not getting?
Okay, that's the basic understanding of the Gemara. Okay,
It's only because the get was an error.
it could be that the get was an error,
But
but
otherwise she
the
could get married.
point was she could get married, but the error was the fact that one could not do either yibum or chalitza with her. Okay, certainly not yibum, and therefore it's the one who got the erroneous get was the one who should have been the one that had the yibum with her, or things like that. That's the main issue.
So because she's a nihilist, then the co-wife could not get married.
Exactly. Right. So now we get to a point. What happens? Sofer, okay, katav sofer get leish, vishovar leisha. So he writes a get, right, the scribe, for this man, and he's supposed to write the receipt for the woman. Okay, but what happened? V'ta'a v'natan get leisha v'shovar leish. But he made a mistake, okay, and he exchanged it. In other words, the wrong documents went to the appropriate people, okay? And in this case, he was the one who gave the get to the woman and the receipt to the man, right? V'natnu zeh lazeh, and then they realized his error, and then they exchanged documents for what would be appropriate. Ula'achar zman harei haget yotzei miyad haish, and after some time, it becomes known that the man had presented this get right to the woman, right? What happens? Vishovar miyad haisha, okay, and right, and the receipt to the. In other words, later on, it became known that there was this initial error in who received which documents. What happens again? She must divorce, okay, this one and this one. And again, all these penalties apply to her.
Why is this true? Because she did not receive the get from her husband.
There is a concern here. Good question, Zeb. There is a concern here about collusion. Okay, that maybe she made some sort of arrangement with the first husband to get up to extricate herself from that relationship, to marry somebody else, and that she would then, in theory, arrange for a divorce from the second guy. He would have to pay ketubah, okay, and then what would she do? She would either go back to the first guy, or she would minimally split the money of the ketubah, giving him part of that money and her keeping the other part of the money. Okay, so this was, you want to call it a fraud, okay? But the concern is that with with the first husband, she would leave, or she would go back, as we just said, or assume that the first husband. Right, so this is the concern.
But what about my question though? You can only, the husband has to give a get to the wife. If someone else gives a get, it's not valid.
That's the point. That's why there is a punishment here. That's why the penalty. Because the scribe was the one, if it became known that that was the case, it was the scribe who gave her the get and not the husband. And so therefore what happens? This whole ceremony is null and void.
So they were living together at this time in Zanus.
So what happens? Rabbi Elazar Omer, he says, Im la'alter yatsa. If they found out about this error immediately, okay, she divorces. Ein ze get. It's not, considered a valid get. Right? Why? Because we just said it was the scribe who gave it to her and not the husband.
I thought if they do it immediately, it is
No.
it's okay.
Ve'im la'achar zman yatsa. All right. If it's only later on that they discovered, okay, hare ze get. Then, according to Rabbi Elazar, it would be a valid get because you don't want to ruin the relationship with the second husband. Okay, that would be one explanation for Rabbi Elazar's view. Lo kol hemenu min harishon la'beid zichuto shel sheni, and that's what the Gemara tells us, because we don't want all of this as a result of the first husband, okay, to ruin the relationship with the relationship regarding the second husband. Okay, now we come to our Gemara after this long Mishnah. So remember, our first issue was regarding the Kotev L'Shum Malchut She'ena Hogenet, and we said that dealt with Rome. Okay, so I'm going to explain this, but I want us to understand that through a good part of this Gemara, there is a difference of opinion as to how to interpret it between Rashi and Tosafot. Okay, and it gets pretty heavy between them. You'd think grandchildren would have a nicer attitude towards their grandfather, but the important thing as we're going to get to it is to try to have some sense of what the pshat of the Gemara is. Okay? My malchut she'ena hogenet. What do we mean by an inappropriate monarchy? Right? Malchut haRomaim. We say it's the Roman Empire. Va'amai kare la malchut she'ena hogenet. And why does the Gemara tell us that we call this an inappropriate empire? Let's use the word malchut here as empire. All right? Mishum de'en lehem lo ktav v'lo lashon. Because they do not have their own style of writing nor their own language. Okay, what did the Romans do? They basically copied the language, culture, everything of the Greeks. And they took it over and they just adapted it. Okay? Amar Ula. Says Ula umipnei ma takinu muchad bagitin. So Ula asks an excellent question. Why do we need to include the secular, any reference to the secular government in the get? Okay? As part of the location or part of the date or things like that. All right? Mishum shalom malchut, because of peace with the empire. Now, this is one quick example of Rashi versus Tosafot. Rashi says, according to Rashi, that the reason they are including it in the text of the get is to engender the goodwill of the foreign government. Tosafot totally disagrees, and he says, no, it's not that the Jews did it willingly. It was because they were forced to do it by the Roman authorities. Okay? And it's because who knows that the emperor, okay, or the son of the emperor or somebody was still in power. And they were concerned that if they did not acknowledge the power of the Roman Empire, the Roman government would come down on them.
It was a government edict to put the
So that was be Tosafot's argument, that it was a government edict, as opposed to Rashi. So I just want to bring that particular example in here, so because it may come back later on in the Gemara. Okay? Everybody with me? So the Gemara asks, Mishum Shalom Malchut Teitzei Vahavlad Mamzer, because of, let's say, Rashi's answer, that they did it willingly to engender the goodwill. For that reason, a child, she should be divorced, and a child would have to be a mamzer. And yes, Rabbi Meir Latame. Why? Because Rabbi Meir holds to his view. The Amar Rav Hamnuna Mishmei De'ula Omer Haya Rabbi Meir, that we have a Masorah here based in the name of Rabbi Meir, namely, Kol HaMishaneh Mimatbeya Shetavu Chachamim Begittin, anyone who changed the official, I'm going to say, formula, like that the rabbis established for the writing of a get, right? Havlad Mamzer. That was the attitude of Rabbi Meir. Okay? Right. So, in other words, we're now going to get to the next part of a Mishnah. Okay? So that would clearly tell us that it doesn't answer the machloket between Rashi and Tosafot as to what Shalom Malchut really meant, but it does tell us at least a reason why, again, since the woman may not have carefully perused the get or brought it to the Beit Din to have them review it, okay, that therefore these penalties apply to her.
In other words, she should have gone against the government's edict and not
No,
included.
no. In other words, either way, it needed to be included in the text of the get. Okay, so fine. If either way, we can understand that's an answer in regards to the Roman government. But our Mishnah referred to the empire of the Medes or the Greek Empire. Okay, why do I need to say that? I could have learned it from what we would call svara, logical reasoning. If you tell me that I shouldn't do it for the Roman, okay, certainly I shouldn't do it for these earlier empires. So now we get to those two examples.
But the other, it's not true because the others, he gives a reason. It says their empire is not legitimate because they have an alphabet and a language of their
No, that
own.
was for the Roman, right?
But the Greeks would be okay.
Well, we'll see. Let's see. That's what we'll get to next step. L'shum Malchut Yavan, our Mishnah prohibited for the Greek Empire. Why? Utsricha. Why did we need to say that? The Iashmo'inin Malchut She'ena Hogenet. Because if we've already learned that we're saying that the empire of the Romans was not appropriate to include in a get, Mishum de Malicha, and that maybe it was included simply because they were still in power. Okay, Aval Malchut Madai, but the Median Empire, Umalchut Yavan, and the Greek Empire, Maida Hava Hava, what was. In other words, those are no longer in existence. So why should we worry about including their references to them in the dating of the get? Okay, so the answer might be, as was suggested, okay, maybe there was a problem because Medea and Greece were always in antagonism, okay, and they were concerned that if the Jews in Bavel put the Greek date, or the Jews in Greek countries put the Babylonian date, okay, it would look, the government authorities would be and think of it either rebellion or think of it as a challenge, things like that. Okay, so that would be one possible option. Okay, as to why the Gemara is also referring to not dating by those two empires. Okay, Ve'iyashme'inin malchut madi u'malchut yavan mishum de malchut havu. But we could argue that regarding the empire of the Medians or the empire of the Greeks, those empires were in existence in the past. Okay, and so fine, we can't use those. So, But our next part of our Mishnah said, Binyan Habayit or Churban Habayit. Okay, but what about the building of the Beis Hamikdash? Okay, Maida Hava Hava. What was. Okay, so why should that be a problem to include in the dating of the get? So the answer, says the Gemara, V'iyashma'inin binyan habayit, we've learned regarding the building of the temple, the amre kimdechare shabchaihu. They might say, oh, that the Jews are remembering their great glory, and that could also be a sign of potential rebellion. Okay? Aval churban habayit, the tzara, who? But using a date from the destruction of the temple, that was a tragedy for us. Why can't we use that means of dating? Emulo, I might say, no, that's not a problem. Sricha, nevertheless, we see that as a problem, and we need to indicate you can't use that as a dating method either. Okay? All right, let's go to the next part of our Mishnah. Okay? Haya b'mizrach v'katav b'ma'arav. If they were in the east and they wrote it in the west. Man, according to whom is that a problem? Ilema Baal. Are we saying that it's when the husband writes the get? Hainu, Shina Shmo Ushma, Shemi Ro v'Shemi Ra. That should be no different than a situation where he may have changed his name or her name, or his location or her location. Okay, so in that case, right, we can't say that it was the situation where we have to rule out that that one of our three options was that the husband wrote the get. Let's get to our second option, where the husband told the scribe to write the get. Ella, lav sofer. Well, isn't it not then that it was a scribe who wrote it? Kida amar laho Rav l'safrei. Just as Rav would tell his scribes as follows, V'chein amar laho Rav Huna l'safrei. And similarly said Rav Huna to his scribes, Kiyat vitu b'shili, when you are time to write this get in the town of Shili, Kitavo b'Shili, write it clearly that it's the town of Shili. V'afalgav demim saran lechumili, and even though the words would have been given in the town of Mili, Bahini, okay, or in the town of Bahini, v'chiyadrivu Bahini, and when you write your gittin in the town of Bahini, Kitavu Bahini, write it clearly as Bahini. Va'afalgav demim saran lechumili b'shili, even though when the husband told you to write it, he could have been in the town of Shili. Okay, our understanding might be here that these were towns of close proximity. Okay, and that maybe they were neighboring towns, and so would you know? Okay, the question is, to what degree did the scribe have to clearly be explicit as to the location where the get was being written, as opposed to where he was informed or commissioned to write the get? Okay, somebody could say, I'll take a current example. Somebody living in Boca might say, oh, I don't know of any scribe that can write Gittin here in Boca, but I do know somebody in Miami. I'll pick up the phone, I'll call Rabbi Z, okay, who's a scribe, and tell him. So now the question is, where should that location be designated? If he's writing it in Miami, he has to put Miami in the language of the get, okay, and not put in Boca, even though the husband was designating it from there. Okay, all right, let's go on. Amar Rav Yehuda says Amar Shmuel. in the name of Shmuel, as we go to the next top of the Amud. Zo divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the view of Rabbi Meir. Aval chachamim omrim, but the sages say, afilu lo katav ela l'shem santar shaba'ir harei zo migureshet. The sages say that even if he writes it according to the local ruler, the person who's in charge of the, say, town clerk. Okay, let's give that example. Okay, the town registrar, right? They would say that that's a valid get. Now, what's the difference here? The difference is that Rabbi Meir said you had to write it according to the Malchut, the empire. It would seem to imply then that you have to include the name of the emperor at that time. Whereas, according to the sages, they seem to say, no, it's sufficient if you write it, is the local clerk or the local authority, because that's enough of a recognition still of the authority of the empire.
What's centaur? Is that Roman or Greek?
Good question. I'm going to guess
Greek.
that it would be still be Greek. Okay. Centaur, okay, could also be very close to senator. Okay. And senator in, if I remember correctly, really meant elder. Okay. But here it's clearly, okay, clearly understood to be a local Roman authority.
Means that in this country too. Senator is an elder.
Right. Okay. We certainly see that with regards to some particular individuals. Okay, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you've got what?
No, senator and let's not politicize that.
Right. I'm not. I'm just saying. That's why I said whether it's Republican or Democrat. Okay, let's go on. But I wanted us to see, pause for a moment here to see that. Now, if you look at from the top of the Gemara, I want you to see Rashi for a second. Okay, Centaur Mefaresh Baba Batra. Everybody with me in the Rashi? Top line. Okay, Bar Mechavanya Zakein Hamimune Liot Baki Benachalat Gevul Sadeh Kol Ish Va'ish. So Rashi already understood, okay, that the original term meant an elder, okay, a person of authority, and his understanding was that it was like the local town clerk, okay, or whoever, okay. But I wanted to, in case it ever gets asked again, I do look at Rashi. Okay, all right. So what happens? Hahu Gita, Dahava Ktiv Bey Lashem Istandara. Okay, now what about a get now that it has the name of the local governor on it? All right, the Beshachar. Right, so that's the point. Okay, so in other words, they received a get and the Beis Din was looking at it and they see it did not have the name of the town clerk. It did not have the name of the emperor. It had the name of the local governor. Shalcha Rav Nachman Bar Chista Lakame de Rava. He sent it to Rava. Ki hai gavna mai. In this case, what's the status? Shalach le. He sent back to him. Baha afilu Rabbi Meir modeh. In that example, even Rabbi Meir would acknowledge that it's an acceptable get. My tama, what would be the reasoning? Me'ota malchut hu, because it's from the same empire. In other words, the governor was either appointed by the emperor, so it still reflects the status of the Roman or whatever authority and of the emperor. But the Mishnah goes on. I'm sorry, the Gemara goes on. Umay shana misanter sheba'ir. So how is that any different from, let's say, the town clerk, right? Hatam zila laho milta. There, with the town clerk, he's too low a person, too low an authority to be to acknowledge the royal authority. Haka, but in this case, right, of the governor, Shebechaya, La Shavicha Laho Milta. In that case, there is enough praise for the empire because he's already a higher authority. Okay? All right, let's go to a new piece. Amar Rav Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Now, there's a big machloket again here between Rashi and Tosafot on the Girsa. Okay? According to Rashi, the Girsa is like we have it right here. According to at least one of Tosafot, it's not Rav, it's Shmuel. Okay? And we're going to not go into this in much detail, but I want us to be aware of the fact what's going to happen. Zo divrei Rabbi Meir. That was the wording of Rabbi Meir. Aval chachamim omrim, but the sages say, havlad kasher. Okay? That the child is valid. Umodim chachamim LaRabbi Meir. And the rabbis would acknowledge the view of Rabbi Meir. Okay? Namely, she'im shina shmo ushma shem iro v'shem ira shehavlad mamzer. That only in regards to change of name, his or her or of location, then the child would be considered a mamzer. Okay? So in essence, this machloket as to whether this statement is by Rav or Shmuel, okay, will basically say that according to Tosafot, the big issue is any date, okay, or any change in location is going to result in a problem with the get, and the child would be mamzer. Okay, that would be Tosafot's view. Whereas Rashi's view, okay, is not as strict, okay, because he reads it as Rav, and therefore it's only after the fact that it could be a problem. Okay, all right, let's go on now. Amar Rav Ashi, Af Ananami Tanina. So we also have a Masorah, a text, Shina Shmo Ushma, if they change his name or her name, Shem Iro v'Shem Ira, the name of his city or the name of her city, Teitzeh Mizeh Umizeh. She must divorce each of them. B'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba. Okay, and all of these we said penalties apply to her. Ha man katanila. Who is it that teaches this? Ilema Rabbi Meir. If we say it's Rabbi Meir, okay, what happens? Le'arvinhu v'litnihu. So put them together, okay? Oops, sorry. Okay, and say it together, he says. Teach it together. Elashmamina Rabbanan. But therefore we learn that it has to be based on the rabbis. Shmamina. Indeed, that's what we learn. Okay. Now we come back to that whole issue of the Ironite. Right? Kol arayot she'amru v'chulei. Right? Any of those that were prohibited, co-wives who could have been from Arayas, right? Nis'u and zinu lo. If it was simply a matter that they had already married, yes, then there's a problem. If she simply had relations with somebody, no, it's not the problem. Lema tahave tiyufta derav Hamnuna. This then would be a proof text against Rav Huna. Why? Because Da'amar Rav Huna, who says, Shomeret Yabam, Shazinta Asurali Yabama. He holds that if a woman is waiting for Yibum from her brother-in-law, and she has relations with somebody else, okay, and what happens? She is then forbidden to her brother-in-law. Okay? Lo nis, right? Vahua din lizanu. That would seem to imply that even if she didn't marry, but simply had relations with somebody, okay, she would be forbidden. Vahai de katani nisu. And the fact then, as Gemara says, so why did he say if she married, yes, okay, and relations, no? Why that separation? The katani nisu, why? Lishna ma'alya nakat. The Gemara was simply using a euphemism. Okay? Ve'ika da'amri. And there are those who say what? Nisu v'huadim lezinu. Okay, that when she married, and certainly if she went and had relations. Lema, Messiah Leila Rav Hamnuna. If that's the case, we should say that that supports the view of Rav Hamnuna. The Amar Rav Hamnuna, as Rav Hamnuna has said, Shomeret Yabam Zinta Asurali Yabama. Okay, that the sister-in-law waiting for Yibum or Chalitza, having relations, she is forbidden to that brother-in-law. Lo nisu dafka, but we're saying here that no, that it's not when she specifically was married. Mishum the michlefa beisha shahalach ba'ala medinat hayam. This is a bit of an issue here. Why? Because we're concerned that she will get mixed up with another woman whose husband went on a sea journey. Okay, so what's the whole understanding here of this piece of Gemara? Okay, the implication is that only when we know for sure, says the Gemara, that she actually did marry somebody else, okay, then that would be a serious problem, okay, in that case, right? All right, that people might think that that would be okay for her to go, even having had relations, okay, or even having married, okay, and therefore if the court decided that she was not to follow the view of Rav Hamnuna, okay, people might think, oh, so what if she got married? She could divorce the second husband and go back and marry her brother-in-law and fulfill the requirement, okay? So the concern is they did not want people to think that that was possible, okay? And as a result, okay, that's why we say that there was this issue that of Rav Himnuna's position, because they might think, well, it could be that the husband was, somebody who gone on a trip and then come back, and that would have been all right. Okay, let's finish up. Okay, yeah. Okay, hakones et yavamto. So here again we see back to this Ilonit issue. One who has relations with his sister-in-law, right? And we said the yeah, kones. Well, the oraita, according to the Torah, if he has relations with her, that's yibum, and so therefore it's equivalent to marriage. Okay, but he has relations with his sister-in-law. In other words, but what happens is the co-wife of that woman, we said, turns out to be an Iloni, incapable of producing children. Okay, so therefore the implication is that this woman, okay, should have been the one who, okay, is has the responsibility for Yibum or Chalitza. Okay? Utsricha, and we needed this. Why? The Ishma'inan Bahach Kamaita, if we had learned it, okay, in regards to the earlier case, Mishum Delo Akim Mitzvat Yibum, where in that earlier case, in other words, the woman was either an erva, okay, or she was an ilonit, okay, you could not fulfill the mitzvah of yibum with her. Aval hach, but in our case, we might argue the akim mitzvah that he was simply going ahead and fulfilling the mitzvah by having relations with his sister-in-law. Yes,
So
Bob.
the man has relations, doesn't that automatically make him married?
That's what the Gemara is asking.
Even if
Exactly.
she's an island.
That's the question. Is that could be considered a mekach ta'ut, an inappropriate relation. Okay? And so therefore, if it's a mekach ta'ut, what happens to the wedding is not toe-face. Okay?
Does that mean that anytime you have relations, if you wait 3 months and doesn't produce a pregnancy, it could be a mekakto?
Well, the implication seems to be that the woman who okay, if she was aware of the fact, she should have, even though she received a get, and there, okay, or is eligible, or her husband died, okay, and is willing to have yibum with law, okay, as opposed to Yitzhak. And if she's discovered that her co-wife was an Irene, I'm sorry, and she's not aware that her co-wife could have been an Iloni, she should wait long enough to determine whether that co-wife is an Ilonite or not.
How would it depend on the co-wife? It depends on her. If she's an Islandese, then the co-wife is responsible. Then that co-wife is responsible for the marriage to perform yibum.
Well, no, the brother-in-law is responsible.
The brother-in-law is
Right, but the sister-in-law should have waited till her co-wife was determined as to whether she's an Ilonite or not. Okay, that's the point.
whether she was an Islandese.
No, whether the sister-in-law, whether the co-wife was the Ilonite.
I don't
Because she-
understand.
Okay,
May I say something?
Yeah.
If the woman is subject to yibum, if
right.
she turns out to be an Islandese,
No. The question is whether the co-wife is an Ilonese. Okay, because if she's subject to yibum, okay,
and suppose you formed yibum, and the co-wife, the co-wife is free.
the co-wife would be free normally. Okay, but it could be a situation where that co-wife is an Ilonite, and therefore the co-wife is not free to marry somebody. And so therefore, all the more so that woman, the sister, has the responsibility to do yibum. That's the point. Okay, so let's just finish up. And if we say that she, so to speak, fell before him, in other words, she was eligible, appropriate, required to do yibum. Aval hatam, in the other case, the lo ram yakame a malo tzricha, and that's why we need both. Right, and now the final section, real quick. Okay, yeah, we're okay. Katava sofer v'ta'a v'natan get leisha v'shovar v'choli. Right, the sofer gave the wrong document to the wrong person. Right, Rabbi Elazar Omer im la'alter yatsa v'chulei. He says if we find it out immediately, she must divorce. Hechidami la'alter. What do we mean? Find out immediately. V'hechidami la'achar zman. And what do we mean by after the time? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, what does he say? Kol zman sheyoshvin vasukin ba'oto inyan zehu la'alter. So long as they're still dealing and discussing the whole time of the matter with the get, that's immediate. Amdu, okay? Once they get up and leave, zehu la'achar zman. That's late, too late. Okay? Varav Adabar Ahava Amar, he disagrees. He gives a different definition. Lo niseit zehu la'alter. So long as she has not married based on that erroneous flip of documents, that's immediate. Nisait, once she's married, zehu la'achar zman. That's when it is too late. Tnan, as we learn in a Mishnah, lo kol hamenu min harishon, la'abed zuchuto shel sheni. Not everyone from the first situation can void the right of the second person. Bishlem el Rav Adabar Ahava, hainu de katani sheni. That's acceptable. Why? Based on what Rav Adabar Ahava said regards to the second person being married. Ella l'shmuel mai sheni. But in regards to Shmuel, why does he have to make a second, say a second person? Just go over to the top. Zechut haruya l'sheni. It's because that second has the prospective right. He has the potential to marry her, and you don't want to ruin that potential for him either. So we'll stop right there on the top of Payala. Okay. So that's
I'm still done. I have to clear up this thing about the islanders.
okay. So
Let me just
Yeah.
explain my what I'm thinking. If a woman is an islandess, she's subject. She she doesn't know about it, so she's